wait a few more minutes if that's okay.
Yeah, perfect.
We usually get to actually meeting her, but one of the things she said was that when a person has a feeling or like an instinct towards something, it's good to be like to verbalize why one feels that way and to pinpoint the principle around the experience. So in applying that to why I think Rebbetzin Cowland is so fabulous and why we're so excited to have her this evening is I think that, you know, many things in Jewish learning in general, and then no less when it comes to a topic like relationships, can be incredibly esoteric and kind of like exist in a realm that seems a little bit foreign or impractical. Maybe not impractical, but just lacking that connection to the practical world. And that's where I think Rebbetzin Cowland is so remarkable, that whatever we learn together this evening is going to no doubt have some real practical ramifications, applications in our own lives, so that once everyone's out of isolation, we can hit the dating scene, people. Many marriages, I hope, post-isolation. Post-dating, post-isolation. But without further ado, Rebbetzin Cowland, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll hand over to you.
Amazing, thank you. How nice of you. How it's so unusual to hear people articulate things other than amazing and great and fabulous, and none of those words mean anything anymore. So that was really considered, and I appreciate that. Thank you, Danny. And hi to your husband behind you. Hello, Rebecca Skowski. Nice to see you both together finally. I keep on seeing you in different sides of the world, so this is great. Okay, so funnily enough, what we're going to learn today, you know, whilst it is a bit of a distraction from discussing Corona, it's actually incredibly well related, because as you'll see by the end of the class, there's a lot of disadvantages in how we generally date. And we're going to talk about the Jewish system of dating, and we're going to not talk about it so that you have to go into the Jewish system, but rather so that you can pick out the wisdoms from the Jewish system and apply them to your own situations. And people always complain to me that it's actually really hard to do that in regular dating environments. But of course, nowadays, everyone's only able to date online. And so there has never been a better setup for people who want to, you know, date regularly, normally, secularly, to apply Jewish wisdoms than this incredible isolation, where actually we are really forced to get to know each other on a deeper level before we get too involved in relationships. So we're going to talk about the wisdom of Jewish dating and how to apply it. And I really suggest that if you are involved in setting people up, or you want to go on dates, that you don't wait till Corona's over. You use this time now, because it is it's very optimum for successful dating, as you're going to find out. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to start with a quick introduction as to, by the way, for those of you who are in pajamas, I just wanted to say, so am I, just so that, you know, this was one especially for you, but really I'm just in pajamas because this is Corona classes. It's so much fun. What I wanted to also say is that you know, we have to start off with a question, because it's a little bit of a chutzpah to assume that Judaism has wisdom about dating. So why are we assuming that Judaism has wisdom about dating? So some people will say, oh, because Judaism's got wisdom about everything. Okay, that's nice, that's true. But also, even though Jewish dating is really weird when you think about it, it's incredibly successful. So here's what I mean by weird, and here's what I mean by successful. What I mean by weird is that Jewish dating looks like this. Idea of boy gets suggested to girl, idea of girl gets suggested to boy. If one of them doesn't like the idea, they don't meet. If they both like the idea, they do meet, and they continue to meet until one of them doesn't want to marry the other, at which point it's over, or until both decide that they do want to marry the other, at which point they get engaged. Okay, there's the whole story. And how long does this experience take? It really depends on how modern you are. Anywhere between 2 dates to 2 months, sometimes longer. I like to recommend longer, but you just never know. And whilst I recommend longer, it only took me 2 weeks, so I'm not a very good advert for long dating, although I do recommend it, but separate point altogether. And you know, that's why it's weird. And why is it successful? Why do we have the confidence to say that it's successful? Just very simply by looking at the divorce rates. Here's what we know. I don't know that we have accurate divorce rates for 2020. In fact, I'm pretty sure that we don't have accurate divorce rates in the Orthodox communities for 2020. What we know that across the world, the divorce rates are anywhere between 50 and 70%, depending on where you are. I heard someone saying that for the first time in many, many years, the divorce rates are going down. And they attributed that to the fact that the divorce rates are so high that people are opting out of marriages and weddings, therefore the divorce rates are coming down. So we're clearly not doing very well in our regular societies. Whereas in Judaism, like I said, we don't have accurate current data. Our data is actually quite outdated, but about 15 years ago, where the trend's already pretty high in the Western world, the divorce rates are somewhere between 2 and 15%. I wouldn't even be surprised if they've doubled, but doubled still comes in at about half of what the rest of the world is experiencing. And what we also know is two more facts, is that when I say 2 to 15%, the more true to Jewish dating and to Jewish lifestyle people's lives are, the lower their divorce rates, meaning the more influenced by Western dating we go, the more our divorce rates also start to creep up. And for those of you who think, well, the divorce rates are really only no because people are miserably married and they have to stay married because they're religious, which I guess could be true somewhat. There is a more recent survey about happy marriages, and the Orthodox come in at the top. So it doesn't seem to be the case that, really they're miserable, they want to get divorced, but they can't because they're religious. It seems to be that they're actually not getting divorced because they're enjoying their marriages. So something's working. And again, when you look at Jewish dating, it's so bizarre that you wonder why it is working, right? But something is. And really what we're going to do today is we're going to try and figure out what's working and take those principles into our regular dating experiences and find that it's going to be really helpful for us to achieve the following. What's the goal of this seminar? Is to help you avoid marrying the wrong person. I can't guarantee that the right person is going to come your way because that would make me, I guess, God. But we can definitely try and stay out of the category of people who are marrying the wrong people. We see that in divorces, the stats of divorce basically happen very strongly in two phases of marriage. One is in the first couple of years. And then for about the next 15 years, people seem to be okay. And then there's this other dip, like much later on in life, after 20 years. So my guess is that people are so busy taking care of their families that they're not realizing how miserable they are often, and they stay in their marriages. And then afterwards, when their kids have gone, they start to reassess, or they have midlife revolutions, or whatever you want to call them. But it's interesting that in the first couple of years, a lot of people are getting divorced, which means probably that in the first couple of years, people are realizing, what on earth have I done? This was such a terrible mistake. And therefore, even though we're not necessarily going to talk about what happens, when people are in their 50s and getting divorced, although today's class will help with that also, for sure. We can definitely recognize that there's a lot of people who are walking into marriages and they shouldn't be, and which is good news, because it doesn't mean that everyone's loving marriage and then, get happy to get engaged and then all falls apart without any kind of pattern. There's a certain pattern that people are getting into their marriages and they shouldn't be. So if we can avoid doing that, we have a much, much bigger chance of staying on the right side of the 50%, meaning to, stay married, which is what we want to do. Okay, is that clear, everybody? Oh, you can't talk. I guess the answer is you can I guess you can send me some thumbs up if that's clear, or throw me questions, or okay. So what I'm going to do next is I'm actually going to ask everybody to unmute their phones, because I'm going to put a question over to you, and then I'm going to collect your answers, and then you're going to mute your phones again. So if you can, everybody can unmute your phones. I'm going to ask and take notes on the following questions for you. Okay, so unmute everyone. I want to hear lots of background noises. Excellent. Okay, here's the question. The question is, what do you need for a relationship? What do you need for a good relationship? What are we looking to make sure we have on our list?
Communication.
Trust.
Respect.
Communication.
Trust.
Yeah.
Loyalty.
Giving.
Shared values.
What? Share values. Okay.
Respect.
Trust.
Yeah.
Open communication.
Okay. Yeah.
Vulnerability.
Vulnerability. Yeah. I'll tell you what I have so far. Open communication, shared values, trust, loyalty, respect, and vulnerability. Gosh, it's so boring. Come on, everybody.
Transparency.
Chemistry.
Love.
Okay, great. Transparency, chemistry, love.
Loyalty.
I have loyalty,
Friendship.
friendship,
Safety.
safety,
Patience.
patience,
Honesty.
honesty,
Commitment.
oh yes, commitment,
Desire.
desire. Okay, good. All right, now you can go on and on and on. Okay, you guys, thank you very much. You can put yourselves back on mute. Thank you. And okay, what we're going to do now is you're going to take a look at my list, and we're going to see that we've made 3 categories, and let's see if we can figure out what the categories are. Okay, so let's start with the easiest one. The easiest one is chemistry and desire. You see that? Okay, that's P for physical. Okay. And then we have a big middle ground: trust and commitment and loyalty and respect and vulnerability, transparency, patience, love, friendship, safety. We're going to call that emotional. And then we have things like open communication, shared values, honesty. Okay, we're going to call that intellectual. Now you can argue and move things around. It's really fine. What's in the categories is not as important as the categories themselves. Okay, IEP. So Danny asked me what's the name of the class, and actually the name of the class is IEP, but then it gives away what this part, so can't say that in advance. But this is the IEP class, and if you can remember the letters IEP, then you stand a very good chance, if you're true to them, of staying on the right side of the 50% of the chances of staying married. Okay, now when we talk about IEP, this is what we're going to do. I'll take this board away because it's annoying. Okay. Intellectual, emotional, and physical. So first of all, the first distinction that we need to make is that what are we looking for in all 3 areas? We are looking for something, and we're looking for something in place of something else that has become very popular and is a very bad idea. What we're looking for actually in all 3 areas is compatibility, as distinct from perfection. I'm going to address that in detail in a minute. We're looking for compatibility. What I mean by compatibility is who I am and who you are. When you put those together, there is an opportunity for growth. Okay, when you put who I am and who you are together, there is an opportunity for growth. I say that because you can have situations where people have compatibility, but it's actually really bad for them. Okay, you can have someone who is really like a bit of a victim type, and someone who's a bully type, and they're actually quite compatible, but it's not good for either of them. Okay, the victim type needs to be with somebody who might be encouraging of them, and the bully type might need to be either with nobody ideally, or with somebody who puts boundaries in. But once you put a victim and a bully together, you're creating a very bad dynamic. So they've got a compatible dynamic, but it's not a healthy one. Okay, like if I'm an alcoholic and you own a vodka factory, I might really, really want to go out with you, but it's not going to be good for either of us, right? I'll be dead and you'll be broke. But so we need a situation over here where the 2 of us together make something that's going to work towards healthy growth. And what compatibility has been switched out for is perfection. So when I say compatibility, by the way, I don't even mean that we need 100% compatibility in all 3 areas, but the claim of the IEP seminar is that if you have 80% compatibility, but in all 3 areas, both in the intellectual and the emotional and the physical, you have more of a chance of making a relationship work than if you have 100% compatibility, but in only 2 out of 3 areas. And that's what we're going to focus on, what it looks like to have a relationship that is like almost there, a 2 out of 3 compatibility relationship. And there are 3 types of relationship that we'll talk about soon. So when I say perfection, what's wrong with perfection? Okay, so over the years, I've come up with different reasons with my audiences, right, as to why perfection's a problem. So reason number 1, of course, the most obvious one, and it's really enough of a reason actually, is that perfection doesn't exist, which means that You know, it's like going to find a spouse and then going to buy a pet unicorn, right? Good luck. You're not going to find it. It doesn't exist. That's a reason enough not to be looking for perfection. But the problem is that because it doesn't exist, if people think they found it, then here's where the next problems with perfection comes in, is that people will inevitably be disappointed. You're either not going to find anything, or if you think you found it, you haven't, and therefore you're going to spend the rest of your life realizing that it's not really perfection, and therefore it really creates a tremendous amount of disappointment and broken expectations, which can be more of the problem than the problem itself. Okay, meaning if you are perfect except for the fact that you're a little bit lazy, it might not be the laziness that's bothering me as much as the fact that I thought you were perfect, and the gap between what I thought you were and what you are is bothering me more than the actual issue that you have, right? So we don't want to walk in with ridiculous expectations of perfection. A, because it doesn't exist. B, because if it doesn't exist, then I'm not perfect and you're not perfect. So, you know, it's the wrong dynamic. Also, perfection, apart from creating dashed expectations, also perfection is really exclusive to growth, right? Growth means I have things that I need to accomplish because I haven't quite finished growing yet. And therefore, you know, I can only grow because I'm imperfect. So I have 5 fingers on my hand. That's the perfect number of fingers. If I woke up in the morning and I found a 6th finger, I wouldn't say, oh, I'm even better now. I would say, no, something's gone wrong, because it's a perfect number. There's no growth even required when there's perfection. Okay, you don't want to make something better when it's perfect. So if we all know that we're in relationships because we want to grow, but we're looking for perfection, something's gone very wrong in the maths. And you know, we have to make a decision. If we want to grow, then we have to realize that there's something amiss with us there, the weaknesses, and that's got to be part of how our relationships you know, actually really blossom. The other thing that's wrong with perfection, and this is well, 2 more things. One is that it's really boring. Okay. 2 is that it creates insecurity, therefore, right? I think you're perfect, you think I'm perfect, and therefore, you know, I don't know what you're doing with me, which is like a whole, you know, bad in and of itself. But one of the worst ramifications of a perfection-oriented dating culture, of course, is that it really creates a culture of lying. Because I know that you'll only go out with a perfect girl, you know that I'll only go out with a perfect guy. Neither of us are perfect, so we have to fake the gap between who we really are and perfect. And therefore, when we have things about us that are really real, that are not perfect, we're terrified that that's going to mean that we're never going to find anyone who wants us, so we hide those things. And then there are trust issues, and then there are incompatibility issues, and the whole thing goes to pot. Like, if we were actually more comfortable with this idea of perfection, you have to be perfect for me, meaning we have to be well suited for each other so we can grow. But that's not called perfection, that's called compatibility. Okay, so once you add for me to the word perfect, you've got compatibility, but it's very different to the perfect model. Okay, it's 2 imperfect things that go really well together. That's perfect. Okay, but it's not actually perfect, it's compatible. Okay, so this word compatible is extremely important, and we're looking for compatibility in all 3 areas. Okay, now, if we are looking for, everybody with me so far? People, apart from people who left, everybody with me so far? Okay. So let's have a look. If we have these 3 aspects of relationship, there's the I, the intellectual, then there's the E, the emotional, and the P, the physical. What that means is a 2 out of 3 compatible relationship is, there are 3 of them. There's IE, there's IP, and then there's EP. Okay. So we're going to take a look at all 3, and we're going to spend a couple of minutes breaking them all down. And you are going to identify some relationships that you may have been in, and it's even possible, and I'm sorry if this does happen, you may even identify a relationship that you're in right now. Again, I don't mean to cause anyone pain, although I do have a bit of a theory that it's much better going through pain when you're still dating than it is to go through no pain when you're dating and then have all the pain when you're married. So sometimes the pain is realizing that there's a problem with the relationship. But, you know, I guess you'll figure those things out. But let's start by looking at the 3 different relationships. So the first relationship is the I and the E relationship. This is a relationship where all the values are lined up. Emotionally, this goes really nicely. We really like each other. We're good for each other. We've got compatible strengths and weaknesses. Unfortunately, there is no attraction. Okay, this is the touch me and I'll puke relationship. Okay, now I'd like to say that many beautiful marriages started off as IE relationships, and as the relationship developed, they became P relationships, meaning chemistry set in at some point. That is not only valid, but that's like excellent, because you are really starting off the relationship in deep aspects than just your chemistry. And then when the chemistry kicks in, often that chemistry really kicks, because it's not just based on physical attraction alone, it's actually based on the relationship that developed ahead of time. So we are not saying that the minute relationship kicks off, it has to have P in it. On the contrary, when relationships build, and as they build, the chemistry gets stronger, that chemistry is often much deeper, much more long lasting, which we'll hopefully talk about later on. But if the relationship is building and at some point it's just becoming clear that, like, I'd love this to be a physical relationship, I'd love there to be chemistry here, this would be the perfect person for me, but it's just get really seriously friend zoned, right? It's just not going into the attraction area, it's just not going into the chemistry area. Much as I wished it wasn't. And by the way, if it's there for one person but not for the other, then it isn't. That's just not good enough. It's got to be there for both of you. If it's there for both of you, if it's just not happening, then it's not happening. And by the way, we have loads of incredible IE relationships in our lives, you'll notice. You have relationships with friends, you have relationships with siblings and parents and teachers and mentors, and there are so many relationships in your life that are fabulous. Maybe your favorite relationships, and they might be your IE relationships. It's got nothing to do with the physical, or attraction. And those relationships are beautiful and special, but they do not make it into marriage category, obviously. And the irony, of course, here is that the more committed you are to either religion or monogamy, the more important it is to have a peak compatibility. If I'm not committed to monogamy, and nor is my spouse, then we can get married because we're really good friends and we think we make great parents together, and do whatever we want to do, outside of marriage. But if we're committed to monogamy or religion, then it's really important that the physical attraction is very satisfying within the context of this unique and hopefully only ever relationship physically. Okay, so IE is a great relationship, but it does not make it unless it stretches to P. And again, I would encourage people, if they're in a relationship starting off and it's only IE at the beginning, P can surprise you. How many times have you been in a relationship and it was just platonic and just a friendship, and then before you knew it, it suddenly became romantic, right? These things you can give them some time, but sometimes it's just not happening. It's just not happening, right? People often ask me about platonic relationships, actually, and I feel like, this isn't very nice to say, but I feel like as a kid I always heard rabbis say there's no such thing as a platonic relationship, which I just didn't think was true, because I think there must be something once ever as a platonic relationship. But what I would say is probably more accurate is that you can only know that a platonic relationship was platonic all the way through in hindsight. Because it can just surprise you at any point. So when you're in a relationship, there's no guarantee of platonic relationship, number one. And number two, you could only really speak for yourself. Okay, you could be absolutely convinced that this is, of course, it's platonic. We're just friends. What do you mean? You can only ever speak for yourself. You do not know what is going on with the other person. On the contrary, the more proud you are of the fact that it's platonic, the more embarrassing it becomes for one of you to admit that it's become something else. Okay, so it's not true that there's never ever been such a thing as a platonic relationship. They do exist, but they can only be known, A, to the one person that you are in the relationship, and B, it can only be said that the whole relationship remained platonic with hindsight once the relationship is over, or behind you, or you've moved on completely. When you're in it can surprise you at any moment. So sometimes a relationship that doesn't look like it's getting into IEP might go that way. So if it's a really wonderful person, it's worth putting the time in just to see whether it develops, and that's not a cheat. That, on the contrary, can be very solid. Okay, so that's the IE relationship. The next relationship, hold on, I'm just going to stop a minute and ask everybody to unmute and tell me if they're following.
Yeah, following.
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 Okay. Super duper. There you go. Oh, it's so nice to see everybody. This is so much more fun than just talking to my own image. Okay, good. All right. I think I'm going to do that more often so I can just see what's going on. Okay. All right. The next relationship is the IP relationship, intellectual and physical relationship. Okay, so what does that mean? It doesn't mean that there's nothing going on emotionally. It means that emotionally it's not compatible. It's not, which can mean it's not healthy, or there's something really missing. So yes, you have a lot of fun with this person, but you are super jealous, or you have a very high expectation of honesty and they just can't do that, or you just really need someone who's much more outgoing, and they just don't have enough, I don't know, they're boring you, or any one of the million reasons why the relationship just starts to go sour in the emotional realm. Okay, often it's to do with trust. Trust comes up a lot. But for whatever reason, if this is, I just need someone really chilled and you're just much too critical. I need someone who is going to take life seriously and you just think everything's a joke. Whatever it is, right? So what happens when the emotional goes sour? Okay, so to me, this is a bit like one of those, the perfect IP relationship is one of the summer camp flings, like you get into these incredible deep conversations all night long and you hadn't even noticed how cute they were. But really, like, intellectually and physically this is fun, but emotionally it just doesn't go the distance. So what happens to these relationships is they tend to fizzle because it's just not there. And then what happens is it kind of stops being helpful that there was an intellectual connection, or what am I trying to say? The problem in the the disconnect, of the emotional connection has become so overwhelming as an issue that has completely dominated any of the good stuff. Like, it really doesn't help me that you're handsome or beautiful, if you're you're a jerk, right? It doesn't help me if you are if I love your ideas, if I actually don't like how you treat people. Like, there's a point where I'm like, and generally what happens is when a relationship starts to really dissolve in the the whole relationship dissolves. One caveat, the IP relationship dissolves very quickly, and this is the scary part, unless the thing that is wrong in the E realm is of an abusive nature, in which case it's clearly not compatible. It's really bad for you. It's really, like, not allowing for health or growth. But the dynamic of the two people is that one is holding onto the other, not letting them out of the relationship psychologically. And therefore you can be in a relationship that should have dissolved because it's not really good emotionally, but the control has set in, and therefore there is like a pattern that's just making this relationship last a long, long time. If it's a different dynamic, if it's just a regular emotion, this isn't working, then that tends to just like really quickly, and then the relationship's over. All right, fizzles very fast. So that's the IP. So again, unless it's abusive, IP is pretty easy to deal with. It's self-explanatory, just like EP is self-explanatory. Which one? Oh, IE is self-explanatory, very nice, but this isn't happening. So then, IP is also just not enough. The problem relationship of the 3 2 out of 3s is, of course, the EP relationship. Okay, and this one you'll recognize and you'll know it very well. It's the relationship that's great emotionally and great physically, and in terms of values, it's just not really happening. This is our problem relationship. Okay, and it's a bigger problem than the others, and we need to understand why, also to help us identify it, but also because we just need to understand why this is a problem relationship, because EP really is the big burden in terms of where things go wrong generally for people. Most people don't accidentally get married when they're not physically attracted, and they don't accidentally get married if they don't like each other emotionally, but they often will accidentally get married if they are emotionally and physically doing really well. Why? Okay, there's a whole bunch of reasons, and I'm going to go through them because it's really important, this one. Okay, number one, I sort of already intimated when I spoke about the fact that the IE and the IP are really self-explanatory, that they don't last well, right? Again, if I'm in a relationship and we're trying to be physical but we're not physically attractive, it's so uncomfortable. So the relationships are very uncomfortable already when you are experiencing a problem with E or a problem with I. They are now, a problem with P. They are currently uncomfortable. Okay, if I don't like you emotionally, I'm already uncomfortable with you, and if I don't feel attracted to you physically, I'm already very awkward in this relationship. However, with our values, a lot of the problems that we might face in terms of our values, if emotionally we're really connected and physically we're really connected, can often be like things about, like sort of grown up things that we'll deal with in the future, you know. But we don't really want to raise our children the same way religiously. Okay, what children, you know? But we, I don't know if we want to build a home based on the same foundations. Okay, what home, right? The problem with it's very values based. The values is really what we build our homes on. So we can be incredibly comfortable. I can really adore you emotionally and physically and feel very, very comfortable with you right now. And the problems are in the future. So that's the first problem. The problem with EP is that right now it's super comfortable. So I want to stay in it because I like it now. I don't want to be mature enough to say, well, maybe one day there'll be a problem with this, so I won't. I'll stop this relationship now. Right now, this is great. Okay, so that's one problem. The second problem, therefore, is because it's comfortable now and it's the future that really holds all the issues, and it's kind of around the corner, but it's a long way off. I can be in this relationship for ages. And I mean ages. We could be high school sweethearts. We can get engaged, you know, in our early 20s, and we can get married and have children before we even start to really hit those issues. Okay, so you can be in a 10-year relationship. You're not going to be in a bad relationship when there's no physical, you know, chemistry for 10 years. It's just not going to last that long. But you can be for a very long time in an EP relationship. So number one, they're super comfortable. Number two, the problems in the future. Number three, most of us start dating. When I say most of us, typically people start dating, and I don't mean for marriage, just regular dating, in their late teens. I don't know what the Australian culture is like, but certainly, you know, most people, some people start when they're 12, some people younger, but generally we start in middle school, high school, in our mid-teens. Now, think about it. If you're in your mid-teens, okay, and you have a relationship with someone where physically it's really uncomfortable, okay, or emotionally they're really horrible, you know already, you learn that that's a bad relationship. Now, imagine that you're in a relationship with someone where they're really nice, they're really kind, they're really sweet, have really good conversation, you really enjoy each other's company, okay? They're honest, it's going really nicely. And physically, you don't do much yet maybe, but what you do, you both like, and it feels nice, and nobody pushes somebody into going further than they want to. It happens to be that, you know, politically and religiously and, you know, otherwise you don't have much in common, okay? How well have you done as a 15-year-old? Brilliantly, okay? Brilliantly. What difference politics? You know, who cares about politics? I care about bowling. Like, do me a favor, okay? So, but I know that if you're not a nice person, or not a kind person, or you push me, or you bully me, or you make fun of me, or you force me into, you know, doing things physically that I'm not ready to. But at that point, I've developed an intuition that says this isn't great, okay? So something happens to us when we start dating young, which is that we start to develop a muscle and intuition for good relationships and bad relationships. Okay, it's true that some people just never get it, unfortunately, and they bounce from terrible relationship to terrible relationship. But the lessons that we learn through experiences are very, very important, and they're building a sense of what to go for and what to avoid. But the context of what you're learning is entirely EP. Of course it is. You're 15, for goodness sake. Of course, what we're interested in is in the now and the comfortable. So you're building a strong muscle for what good relationship looks like. So by the time you're 25, you know exactly what to avoid and exactly what to go for. But your context is entirely EP because you haven't really thought about your values or your future yet. So it's a complete re-education to start thinking about like this whole other side of yourself. And unless you have somebody annoying like me that comes along, most people do not tap you on the shoulder and say, oh, you know how you've learned so many things over the last 10 years about dating, relationships, what you like and what you don't like. So can we just really completely redefine that? But this time we'll add your future and your values and your children. Like if you don't do that deliberately, then generally you tend to not do that. People will get married to people who their muscle has discerned as a good spouse because emotionally it's nice and physically it's nice. And then they'll find out after they get married, like, we just grew apart. And often that doesn't mean we grew apart. Often it means by the time we needed to talk about the more serious things about life, we realized that we were apart. We just were never really connected. We just didn't know to do this. Okay, so that's another reason why EP is a problem. Another reason why EP is a problem is that the exposure we have to relationships really comes often, apart from those few of us who are lucky enough that saw a good model at home, and which is again 50%, right? Most people, their exposure to what relationships looks like will come from the media, right? Either real life media or books and fiction and cinema and that kind of thing. And here's the sad thing about a good romantic movie. The sad thing about a good romantic movie is that the following is true. The less likely that relationship is to work, the more romantic we consider it to be. That is not a good model. Okay, now think about it. Think about every movie you've ever seen. When was the last time you saw an incredibly riveting, fantastic, fascinating movie about two people who had the same goals in life? Okay, the bad movie. It might be a good life story, but the very, very, very bad movie is not going to make it in Hollywood. Think of every story you've ever heard from when you were little. You know, why is Cinderella so gorgeous? Because he's a prince and she's a slave girl. Okay, put that into real life. That's not going to jive. You know, why is I don't know, Beauty and the Beast such a fabulous story? Because you know, that doesn't happen in real life. That's not good either. And of course, in the end, he's not really a beast. The whole thing isn't true. In any case, you know, Sleeping Beauty, forget it. Like, you know, she's 100 years older than him if you do the maths. Yes, okay, good. And Snow White, never. I think she was unconscious the first time that they kissed. I mean, but the reality check of these movies isn't working at all. And many of our most favorite characters that got together in our stories and movies and fairy tales, and you know, the less likely they are to make it in real life, the more we consider that romantic, which is a horrible, horrible model for us. Okay, it's the love conquers all model. It's the, you know, the unlikely and the other. It just doesn't really hold that way in real life. In real life, the more things that we have in common, the more likely we are to make our relationships work. That doesn't mean that opposites don't attract. I'm not getting into that discussion right now, but we certainly need things in common to be able to build. We need values in common, and if we are just total opposites, you know, it makes a good story, but it doesn't make a great relationship. So our EP models our relationship models are all EP and very, very unusually IEP. And then there's our school systems. Our school systems, and this bit is like the bit that's really bothersome, and I hope it's one of the things that this whole sort of reconsidering of the social structure and the educational structure of the world that is under really a microscope at the moment with Corona and the possibility of reinvention. You know, if you think about your lives, right? Isn't it true to say that everybody wants a great relationship? I'm just going to see again. Yes. Okay. And isn't it true to say that people want a good career? It's true, right? Yeah, and God bless you, should have both. Okay. But think about how crazy it is that if you look at how many hours you spend in school, okay, you spend, since you're like 4 to 20 something in school, and the vast majority of your day is teaching you how to have a good career. You learn how to read and how to write so that you can pass to the next grade, so you can finally get your whatever you're doing, or SATs or JDs or whatever, A-levels, I don't know what you guys do, so that you can go on to university, so you can get a fantastic career. And essentially your whole school life has led you to becoming a super taxpayer. Okay, but you also want to have a great relationship. And how much of your time in school has taught you anything about relationships? Not much. Because we live in societies that are so much more productivity based than they are ethics based, that even though we know that people need good relationships and it's important to have wonderful parents and all the rest of it, your life has basically been, your education has been completely committed to you making fabulous pay packages, because our productivity oriented societies where success is connotated completely by our wealth and our careers has not given very much time to education. And when I speak to teachers, they agree with me more than anybody else. Okay, this is not against teachers. The teachers will say to me, yes, and you don't know how hard I work to try and put in life skills for my students, because all we're teaching them is mathematics and, you know, and reading and writing skills and all that kind of stuff. But the real skills that they need socially, like, that's what we know our kids need. And the Ministry of Education is forcing us to teach them all these other things, and we do our best to make sure that we slip in as much as we can under the pressure, you know, of a curriculum that really just focuses on how much, in the end of the day, money people are going to be making. So it's not so much that people don't want to focus on their values, it's that we haven't really had a chance to. And maybe when we're 25, if we have a year off to go to India, we'll find ourselves. Probably not, because we're too busy paying back our student loans, right? But maybe we'll find ourselves somewhere over there. And other than that, you know, this whole question of what our values are and what we stand for, there's been no time to explore it because we're too busy becoming doctors and lawyers. And again, that it's not attack on us. I think we are the victims of these systems. It's attack on a system that's put so much time and energy into consumerism and into money as a sign of success, rather than self-knowledge and fulfillment as a sign of success, which is a whole other conversation. But so we have a situation where, oh my God, I had to cute. It's not cute, so it's a terrible story. I was teaching a class once, and this poor guy, he oh my goodness, if there were tomatoes in the room, this guy would have been covered in ketchup, honestly. He put up his hand and he said, for me, talking about my values is just really, really like intimate. So I really just don't want to do that on a date. I just rather sleep with a girl. It did not go down well. It did not go down well. He got so booed out of the room. But what I think he meant was, in all fairness to him, because he wasn't a stupid or insensitive guy particularly, it wasn't the best turn of phrase. But what he meant was, I am completely out of my depth talking about my values because I haven't spent any time really having such a clear relationship with them that I can articulate and share them on a date. My whole life I've been quite used to physical relationships, so this is an area that I'm comfortable in, and that's something that's really happened. The EP has become the focus of relationship, and the I has completely fallen off. We've got no time in schools, we've got no modeling from what we watch on TV. It's just not a focus. The focus is the emotional and the physical and the productivity and the now. So of course, here I am going on and on about why it's important to make sure you have shared values, but it's only fair that I support that argument, okay? And I'm going to support the argument with three reasons why having I compatibility, which means A, giving yourself the time to know what your values are, and B, making sure that once you know what they are, making sure that the other person and you have enough compatibility in your values that you can build a home together. That there are three simple reasons that I find to be easy to articulate as to why this is important. Reason number one is simply prioritization. Okay, prioritization means there's a choice between this and that in my life, and this comes over that. Okay, that's simple. Do I take my physical health seriously, or do I take my eating pleasures seriously? Okay, that's the difference between people who spend more time in the gym and more time in a restaurant. Okay, do I spend more time educating myself or more time enjoying myself? Do I put my money into investments because I care about being cautious, or do I put more time into just splurging out because I appreciate fun? On a Sunday, would I rather hang out with my friends or call my mum? In my evenings, is it more important for me to contribute and to volunteer, or is it more important for me to just hang out with people that I'm close with? We make decisions all the time. Do I want a cultural holiday, or do I want a relaxation holiday? How do I decide between one thing or the other? One thing has to tip the scale for me. This is called prioritization. And what values do is they inform our priorities. Okay, so I'll tell you a story. That when one of my kids went for a semester abroad to America, and she lived in a house that I couldn't get my head around. Okay, this woman spends more time at work than me, has more young children than I, and her house is always perfectly clean and tidy. And luckily the camera is only looking over here, but if you were to look around, you'd see that, I do not run a ship-shape perfect house, and I said to my daughter, well, since you're going to go live in the house, do me a favor and learn all the tricks of how to keep a perfect house and call me, let me know so I can keep a perfect house. Okay, this is my very simple solution. So after about 3 months, I called her up. I'm like, well, you've been there long enough. Okay, what's her secret? Tell me what to do. And she said, Mum, you don't stand a chance. I'm like, excuse me. She said, it's just not enough of a priority for you. I said, what do you mean? It's very important to me. I really want to have a tidier house, and I really want to figure out how to do that. What do you mean? And she said, no, Mum, it's not a priority for you. Meaning, if it's Erev Shabbat and you've only got 2 hours left for Shabbat and there's not enough food, or the laundry has to be folded, you'd make food. And I'd say, well, of course I make food. The laundry can wait. What do you mean? She goes, yeah, well, they wouldn't. They'd make sure the house was clean. I said, what about the food? They say, I don't know, whatever. She'd send out her husband to take away and get some kugels. I'm like, what? No, it's in my house. I'd have a room full of unfolded laundry, before we had bad food. Food is really important. It's a priority. Okay, so the laundry can wait. She goes, and furthermore, Mommy, 60% of her pay package goes to cleaning help. I'm like, 60%. I've got so much more fun to spend my money on than cleaning help. She's like, exactly, it's not a priority, you know. And furthermore, mommy, she goes, you know, if somebody called you up and said, like, I really need to talk, you know, then you would, like, she would say, I can't because, I don't know, the ironing isn't done. And I say, really? And she said, yes, not because you're better or she's better, nothing to do that, just because there are certain priorities in life, and our values inform our priorities. So technically speaking, it's very difficult to build a relationship with someone or to build a home with someone where, you know, they want one thing and you want another, and you just keep on clashing all the time. Okay, you want your kids to just stay home and chill, and they want the kids to go out and do and explore, and you want, you know, to spend every other evening building a relationship with your family, and you know, they just want to hang out with you, and you want to put your money towards you know, beautiful artifacts, and they want to give it to charity. It's a constant clash. So values in common help prioritizations. Number one. Number two, and here it starts to get a little bit deeper. Anybody have the experience of losing respect for someone for whom they once had respect? Isn't it awful? Isn't it like the worst ever? You really had respect for someone, and then, ugh, just like something kills it. So what kills it? So I've asked many groups of people what kills it, and people tell me all sorts of answers. They say they betrayed me. I thought they were nicer than they were. They were a hypocrite. You know, I didn't realize they were a racist. There's all sorts of answers that happen when people feel that they've lost respect for someone. But essentially, they have one thing in common, and that is, I thought you were this, and it turns out that you were actually that. Okay, I thought that this was your value system, and it turns out that it was actually that. So where this can be complicated is when someone really does share your value system, but they make a mistake, and then the question of forgiveness comes into it, of course. The ability to say, hold on, I don't have to lose respect for you. You just had a natural human error, and that can happen, and that's where we do try and recover our relationships. But if I honestly thought that you were someone who was honest, and you turn out to be, you know, a thief, and that's really who you are, it wasn't just a human error, it was a real thing, very hard for me to respect you, because just like love, and I'm going to give a definition for love based on my Rabbi Noah Weinberg, who used to say that love is the feeling that you get when you focus on somebody's virtues. Okay, I like you, and then I realize how kind, how special, how thoughtful, how considered you are. The more I know your virtues, the more that feeling builds into love, which is very hopeful for those people who need to rebuild love in a relationship. Focus on the values, that feeling will kick in more. That's how it goes naturally. Just like love, and I never heard him say this, but this is my own addition, but I'm pretty sure he would have liked this one, right? Just as love is a feeling that you get when you focus on someone's virtues, so respect is a feeling that you have when you're connected to someone's values. Okay. Once I thought we shared values, but it turns out that we don't actually in real life. When push comes to shove, you're not doing things for the reasons I thought you were. You are not, you don't have the same scruples that I thought you had. The feeling that leaves me at that point is respect, because that's the emotional equivalent of values connection, is respect. And it's very, very hard to be, to respect someone that you just don't respect anymore, obviously, but it's very hard to be in the same room with them, and it's extremely hard to be intimate with them emotionally or physically. It's just such a feeling of revulsion, and the last thing we want to do is marry someone and then realize that actually we don't share the same values on a core level. It looked like we did because we had similarities in lifestyle, but you know, you were working really hard as a lawyer because you want to make money, and I'm working really hard as a lawyer because I believe in justice. And okay, like there's a disconnect over here. You'll defend anybody who can give you money, and I'll really try to take on cases that I believe, you know, need my help. And how can I respect you? I thought you had the same values as me, and it turns out that we don't. As we discover a values disconnect and the respect goes down, the relationship ultimately gets very, very, very reduced. It makes it very hard to maintain it. So we do have to have a sense of what's really important to us to be able to really ascertain, not just intuitively, but with definitions, whether this person shares what we hold very dear. That's the second reason. So first reason is priorities, and the second reason is respect. And the third reason, very simply, is like this. You ever woke up in the morning and you're just like, what is life about? Like, I'm so miserable. Right? What's happening at that point? What are we really experiencing? we're really experiencing a lack of meaning. Okay. And when we have a lack of meaning in our lives very quickly feel just empty and compromised and pointless. So how do we have a life of meaning? So, I mean, you can read, there's so many beautiful things to read on meaning. Viktor Frankl's book is beautiful. There's so many angles on this. I don't want to like oversimplify it, but for a second, just to oversimplify it, nevertheless, you know, when the life that we lead is truly built on the values that we hold dear, then quite naturally we feel that our life is meaningful. And very often we look at our lives and we've made so many decisions, not because of our own values, just because of expectations from society or parents or families or norms. You know, we ended up doing things and becoming things and living things that just don't really reflect our most core values. And as a result of that, we're living a life, and there's this gap between what we do every day and that fulfilling feeling you have when something is meaningful to us. So a big part of becoming like a really independent adult, certainly before you commit to somebody else with whom you're going to share that platform, is to say, if I want happiness and I want meaning and fulfillment, I have to make sure that my life is a reflection of my core values, and I have to do the work to figure that out. And once I've done that work, and then I found a partner with whom we can, you know, share the platform of values, then our life is going to naturally feel much more meaningful. Okay. I think my time's almost up. Gosh, that was so much fun. I'm going to take a break now for questions. Feel free to unmute yourselves, and let's put 5 minutes of questions.
I've got 2 questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Both related to the IEP structure. I think if I understood correctly, you said you'd want to fulfill them at 80% at least in each category. So in the religious framework of dating, do you think like with the shortened time period that like that's enough time to be able to accurately hit that sort of 80% mark in each category?
So the truth is that it depends on how well prepared you are for dating. For many of us, we haven't really had enough time to become super self-aware. So the dating process is a combination of trying to not show the other person how serious we are, because that's really off-putting in many of our societies, right? So we have to spend 6 months convincing the other person that we're not that serious so we don't scare them off. So there's a lot of gameplay anyway that happens. But even if we're both serious, if I don't really know myself very well, then I'm going to need this dating time to really figure out all the answers to my own questions, to figure out whether you can actually, you know, be a partner for me. So if I'm learning about myself whilst I'm dating, it's going to take me ages. The readier I am, the more I've done the homework ahead of time, you know, the more I ask my own questions of what my values are, what my weaknesses are, all the rest of the stuff. Then when I come to, by the time I've met you, right, I know well enough what my weak points are, what my values are that are really important. It doesn't take very long. So like I actually tell people, I joke around when I say I really dated my husband for 2 weeks. But the truth is, the year before I dated, I had a whole year of self-reflection and learning and growth. And by the time I was ready to date, I felt like I dated him for a year and 2 weeks. It's just that he only showed up at the end. But I had done so much of that work on my own. So I had a very clear idea of what my list of things that I wanted went from really long to really short, because I became more self-aware. The list of things that I needed from a person emotionally had now reduced because I had really done the work on myself. So yeah, if you are really self-aware and you're ready and you've put the time into what my values are and who am I, you know, emotionally, physically, anybody can figure out very quickly. But the rest can come quickly if you've done the homework.
That sort of relates to my second question, which is it possible to reconcile the 3 categories with the idea of love at first sight? Like, could you hit all those three categories successfully with that idea of love at first sight?
Yeah, so love at first sight can happen. It really can happen. It does happen. Sometimes it's almost like the soul knows. You know, it's like you can't really explain or put into words. Because the truth is, and I'm really actually glad that you brought this question up, because after you've done this work, there's still something that needs to happen in a relationship, and that is that you get this bolt of clarity that's beyond all the categories, where you just have this sense of like, I know this is the right person for me. So the IEP is actually much more about not marrying the wrong person. Like, you must have these 3 there to be able to marry this person. If they're not there, it's the wrong person. Okay. But the right person is IEP plus a certain, like, just deep knowledge that almost comes from your stomach. So there are some people who experience that knowledge before they've even started the process, you know, and they can't explain it. It's just some kind of intuition that they just know. But they still then have to go through the process of making sure that they're not just infatuated and that they really like this person. So they are, to some degree, at a disadvantage. Why? Because if you have this very strong feeling, it does cloud your intellectual process. You know, so I have a relative whom I adore, who met this girl, and he kind of instantly knew that this was the right person. But then he started to date her, you know, and like my job as the the worried relative was like, you need to put aside your intuitive knowledge and do the process anyway. You need to be able to separate that. You know, so when I have this experience of love at first sight, first of all, it could be rubbish. It could be infatuation. You could just look like someone that I've dreamed of. This could be a Hollywood moment. You may have flirted with me very successfully, and actually we have nothing to do with each other. Even if it is something coming from a deeper place of insight, I'm now at a disadvantage, because now I'm so invested in this working that I may do the one thing that if we do to ourselves, we're going to really hurt ourselves, and that is to not be honest about whether this is the right person. So when either you're extremely attracted to someone or you experience love at first sight, then you're at a disadvantage, because it's still not a good enough reason to not do the work and to be able to say, hold on, do we share values? Hold on, are we emotionally good enough? You know, that stuff still has to be done. And the mature data needs to say, okay, I know that I felt this, and I may even come back and say I was right all along, but I'm going to shelf this for a little bit and do my due diligence. You know, it's a bit, I don't know, it's a bit like you're buying a house and you fall in love with the house. You still need to get the surveyors in to say whether the foundation is going to fall apart or not. You've got to do that, and you've got to be willing to say, I may have to just say, like, this can't happen. It's just much harder when you're in, when you're in that place of being sure before you've got the information to back you. So that person's just got, you know, the mature data just has a bit of a harder task, because they need to separate between their due diligence and their dating process and their intuition. And either they're going to come back and say, okay, now I've done the work. I can say, like, I knew the minute I met them, but I've done the work. Or they can say, the truth is, once I got to know this person, I realized that love at first sight was just very romantic and very non-real. And actually, the person that I thought I fell in love with has got nothing to do with the person that I'm dating, and this has to stop.
Thanks.
That makes sense?
Yep.
Okay.
I have a question.
Hi.
I'm just wanting to know, what are your thoughts on compromise in a relationship?
Oh, great question. Okay. I get very nervous around the word compromise, even though I know it's a very important part of relationships. I get very nervous because it depends how we're using the word compromise. Okay. What many people I've seen do with the word compromise is they meet someone that they really know this can't work with, but they're so committed and obsessed with making it work with them that they use compromise as this very glorious word to make themselves look like they're a very good relationships person, when actually what they mean is, I'm going to sacrifice a whole big chunk of what's important to me because that's the only way to make this work. Okay, so when compromise means that I have to put so much of who I am and what's important to me aside in order to make this work, then we no longer call that compromise, we call that sacrifice. And whilst it's your right to make that decision, you have to really take responsibility for that. Okay, let's take an easy example to work with. I'm marrying someone who doesn't want to have kids, even though I do. I'm willing to compromise. You know, well, that's not compromise, that's a sacrifice. Okay, and you have to take responsibility for what you're about to give up of yourself in order to make it work. It might just be that if the compromise asks too much, the better thing to say is, this relationship can only work if I over sacrifice, and therefore I need a different relationship. Now, once I have made a decision, you know, that we really do share in our values and that we really are emotionally well suited and all the rest of it, at that point I can say, look, we're not going to be on the same page about everything. And I'm going to leave my corner and come to a middle, and the other person's going to leave their corner and come to a middle. And in that middle, we'll find a space that we can jibe. Okay, so if you want a blue living room and I want a red living room, it's okay to say we'll have a purple living room. Okay, it's okay to say that. That's not a sacrifice of a value that is so deep in you that to give it up is to give up something more than a relationship should be asking of you. That's to say, okay, I've moved my expectations slightly, I've shifted it slightly, I'm able to meet you in this middle. But if the middle that is being asked of me is, again, it's too much of a sacrifice, then you as an adult has to make the decision as to whether that's that's a good idea, whether the resentment that the sacrifice demands of you is going to backfire on the relationship, whether that means that this isn't really a life partner because we don't really share values, and if the ask is too much, then very often it's more of an indication that the relationship isn't really compatible. And each person has to look at the compromise that's being asked of them in each situation and assess that.
Thank you.
Asha.
I have a question based on that. So if you say that you can't really compromise values, can you sort of grow into the IEP sort of framework?
Can you grow?
Yeah, like can you, like, I don't know, can those areas, like, can they be enhanced? Like, can you make it work?
Yeah, so it depends. There's I like to make a distinction about, if you like, between my core values and the expression of my core values. So for example, okay, this is an easy example. Let's take a religious example. Okay, I'm going out with someone who keeps Shabbat strictly and I keep Shabbat, like, basically. Can we make that work? Okay, that's a question that comes up very often, because you're not gonna marry your mirror. That's boring, right? You're not gonna marry your mirror. So it really depends on what the core values are. If on a core value, the reason I'm keeping Shabbat and the reason that you're keeping Shabbat are really overlap. We both care about Judaism, and we both care about growth, and we both want to be good people, and we both believe in God. Okay, those are the core values. But you've had more time learning than me. You're more into details than I am. Like, on a lifestyle level, we're not in exactly the same place, but our core values, and this is the important point, are directing us in the same direction. Then even if we're not in exactly the same place, our core values are the things that actually sort of direct us. Okay, so we're heading in the same direction. I might always be a bit behind you, but we're heading in the same direction. It's based on the same things. So we may have to you may have to watch TV in your room while I sing my Zamira in the other room. But we respect each other because those values are shared. Okay, but if the reason I do things that I do is because I want to impress people, and the reason that you do things that you do is because you're really spiritual, and there's no overlap of those core values, and therefore there's gonna be no respect. Every time you do something spiritual, I think you're a freak. Okay, and every time you do something to impress everybody else, I think you're a hypocrite. Then that relationship is going to have a much harder time. And I would say further than that, sometimes you can have people, they're in exactly the same spot in life, but they're going in very different places, right? So I hear this very often. Oh, I've met the perfect person for me. Why? Because we're in exactly the same place. We both keep Shabbat, and we both love to go to the disco. Okay, it's amazing, perfect. We understand each other so well. Okay, oh, that's a problem, but I'm just saying, like, there's a bit of this and a bit of that. We have a bit of a fun life culturally, and we also have a bit of a religious life. It's perfect. But what's going to happen in 5 years' time? One person is on a massive spiritual journey, and the other person is getting less and less interested in religion. Okay, let's say. So one person's core values is shoving them like north, and the other person's core values are shoving them south. There's going to come a point where, even though the lifestyle had a crossover, they didn't have the same things in common. But you can have someone where they're miles ahead of me. Technically speaking, they've been learning more, they know more, but we're actually quite committed to heading in the same direction. So our core values and the respect that we feel for each other is very, very on the same page, even though we're in different places in life. So yes, of course you can grow, and no, you don't have to be in exactly the same place. But the things that ultimately motivate you, there needs to be enough respect for the things that motivate people, so that we can say, wherever we were when we met, in 5 years' time, whilst no one can say exactly where they're going to be in 5 years' time, I have enough information as to where my core values are taking me, that I'm going to like the place that we're both heading towards. If we're heading in opposite directions, then we have to be, even if we're at the same place now, we're in trouble. But if we're heading the same direction, even if we're in different places now, yes, we can grow into it. So you've got to take a look at where your core values are directing you, and then you'll have the answer to your question.
Yeah.
Make sense?
Okay, I've
Okay,
got
I'm sorry, it's not too crass to use a religious example. It's just very easy to see it, when people are coming from different lifestyles. Obviously, that applies in all sorts of things.
I've got one question for you. We're just thinking about and we're discussing, like, when you're getting, should I say it? When you're getting into a relationship, marrying, say at the age of 17 or 18, you haven't had as many life experiences, say emotionally, spiritually, religiously, intellectually, as you would when you're 25. So
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, like, how do you know when you're at that age when you haven't had as many life experiences in comparison to when you're 18 compared to when you're 25 and you've had a lot more of these experiences, knowing more what you want, and you've got you more deep into a relationship and also a relationship with yourself before you get into, because there's so much to learn.
Yes, certainly. So I would say it's interesting that the sort of communities where people marry very young, and when it works, are the communities where the community and family life plays such a big role in people determining their values, that they've almost grown, like, when they could have got married when they were 3, like the idea of what their values are so defined by their communities, that by the time they're 17, they are often more aware of their values than someone who's 30 who's had no guidance, at all. Okay, if you're coming from and you've got to be comfortable in a community where the values to some degree have been determined for you, but you've done your process when you're 15 or 16 of deciding that you like where you come from, then that's often good enough, because again, in fact, communities that really put a large emphasis on values, you get again, people will be more clear about their values than many people who go through life without any education, by the time they're 50. So it's often not an age thing. What I would say for sure is that if you come from a community where they push marriage quite young, and you have a sense already, and often kids do, that this is not good, this is not working for you, you are not ready to get married until you've had enough time on the path to define what your new lifestyle is going to look like. And it's very, very important to not get rushed into something because of a community's values if you're sensing that you're disconnecting from that. However, what I would also say is that don't be fooled by the advantage of age either. When people hit 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, and they're having more and more experiences, often it doesn't bring more self-awareness and clarity. It just brings more stories, more complexity, more insecurity, more confusion. It's not always true that complex experiences create more clarity, unless a person knows how to draw clarity from their complexities. And very often, if a person is at a point in life where where they're young, but they're quite clear that they're in, they have an easier time making a relationship work than if they've allowed themselves to get very, very into their own story. Because once your story is very complex and you have to join it to somebody else's story, that's much more of a complicated thing. So it's not really a question of time. It's much more of a question of clarity. You can have clarity when you're young, and you can have lost your clarity over all those experiences as you got older. So the question is, do I have clarity? Not how old I am. So that's it. And that's a very individual question. Like some people in their 30s need more time to get more clarity, and some people, in their late teens, they have a kind of clarity that if this was it forever in terms of their values partner, they'd be okay, and they are okay. So yeah. What you do need is self-awareness, and what's also useful is a mentor to check in on your self-awareness. But age is slightly red herring in this question.
Can I ask a slightly similar kind of question? It's more to do with the intellectual aspect as opposed to more experience in general. You mentioned that generally we only see if the intellectual part of relationship is fulfilled at an older age. Like we kind of see that as we grow, when we have to reflect on family and that type of thing. When we have to reflect on those values. So how would you say that at a young age we try and connect with someone intellectually and have those discussions about the future values and long-term family goals without kind of getting carried away with the relationship and kind of scaring the other person off?
I'm not entirely clear on your question. How do you not scare a person off when you're younger? What exactly do you mean?
How you kind of said that at a young age, it's much easier to connect on an emotional and physical wavelength, and the intellectual part, it kind of comes when we're older and really have to face those values, family values, and what's important on a deep level. So how at a young age do we kind of see if we can connect with someone intellectually? I don't know if that makes sense.
What kind of age do you mean when you say young age?
Early 20s, I guess.
Okay, I don't know that that's such a young age. Early 20s is a when I was talking about a young age, I was talking about, when we date in our teens and we're not interested in our values, we're just interested in our emotional and physical. I think, again, if a person has done enough self-internalization and self-awareness work, then there's no reason that by the time they're in their early 20s, they can't have a very good sense of their core values and their core needs. I don't think that's too young an age. What's difficult, of course, is when the person that you're with is not interested in being serious. And again, that's also not an age thing. If you are ready to date for marriage and to have those discussions for marriage, and you're dating someone who's terrified of commitment, then you're not going to succeed in those discussions, irrespective of the age. The easiest way to date for marriage is to be dating someone who's also, I know this sounds very obvious, but it's not so obvious. The easiest way to date successfully for marriage is to be dating someone who is open to the idea of dating for marriage. If a person doesn't want to go there because they're just scared of commitment, then they're just not going to go there, irrespective of their age. So once I have my clarity, what makes dating much more successful is if I know that the person that I'm dating is open to real discussion. If they're not, because they're really just dating for fun and they don't want to settle for it for many years, then we have a very, very frustrating experience. That's a big piece of it, like whether we're on the same place, whether we're in the same place in terms of what our intentions are for this dating. Hello. Oh, I think I've lost Megan. Okay. Is everybody still there? Did I lose everyone? You're still there? Okay.
I think
All
everyone's
right. Yeah, okay. All right. I'm going to actually have to wind down now. It's so much fun talking to you chaps.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Rebbetzin Cowland. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in and participating.
That was great.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, great. I hope that's useful. If anybody wants to email me with more questions, you're welcome to ilanacowland@gmail.com.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Okie dokie. Thank you.